Hey everyone, welcome to the Elu Cohen Research Channel. This is the second video of the Treatise on Reintegration. My name is Tim Wright, and I am going to be presenting a little bit of the treatise for those who want to learn more about it. Now, recently in the aspirants of the Rose Cross channel, we've had a discussion about the mythology of the Elu Cohen and the number system of the Elu Cohen. And in a comment I made that this is two parts of a system. There's the mythology, which is the doctrine of Martinez de Pasqually. Also added to that is the 10 Instructions by Saint Martin, and many other works. And then as well as the doctrine, you have the practical working of the Elu Cohen, which is not really known to anybody outside of closed circles. So it's kind of foolish to speculate on it. For those who know, they know. And those who don't know, you'll need to, as I've said before, find a more efficacious way than YouTube to find out that information. So this video series is only going to focus on the mythology and kind of, it's oxymoronic, but the structure of the mythology. So the next portion of this video series, I wanted to discuss what is often confused, and this is the law, precept, and commandment. Not from a number mathematical system. You're going to have to become initiated or have discussions with those who are in order to have that conversation. What I noticed in reading the Treatise of Reintegration of Beings is that Martinez has a very similar way of talking about these concepts as Jakob Boehme. I recently tried to do an overview of Jakob Boehme's Mysterium Magnum, and I found that it's just too much. And a lot of it is covered by Martinez. So in the Treatise of Reintegration of Beings, he talks about how this power emanated these beings for its own glory. And what is not known, that we covered in a little bit of the last video, is that the glory that he's talking about is not the glory of his own aggrandizement, but the glory of recognition of his attributes. Its attributes, not really a him at all. We just use this language so frequently that I used him, but you can put the editorial sick, as I see there, to put it him, her, it, them, they, he, she, whatever you want to call this divinity, in those terms, it's okay with the divinity. In fact, that's the whole point, that as long as you're making reference to the divinity, this divinity doesn't really care. It's more focusing on not making reference to oneself, and making reference in oneself in relationship to your emanative status from divinity. It's challenging stuff because we're not raised in this society, and at least our day and age in 2022, to be like, yeah, I don't matter. It's not all about me. I'm not the most important, center of all information and all things. So it's not something that we're used to. But Martinez certainly was postulating that these Elu Cohen, and that's just a short term for the elect priests, knights of the universe, sovereign glory, on and on and on. They had a long names for things, and so The Elucoan were a group of usually Masons. Okay, I'm not a Mason, so there's no Masonic lore or secrets being given. What's happening though is that those who participated in the rites of the Elucoan were Masons, um, and they were not just Masons like the first 3 degree Masons. Although that was important, these were Masons of the royal secret. In fact, Michel Nahon, the president of the Martinez de Pasqually Society, has really, really covered this in her book titled Martinez Pasqually. So, what she goes over is something really profound that Martinez went through in about 5 years, all of the high grade masonry in France at the time. Now, I'm not here to argue, just saying that this is what she says. And as he went through, the Grand Lodge at the time had issues with him presenting the Elucoan. They were like, no, no, no. Well, at first they were like, let us know what this is. And he went all out in presenting the Elucoan to them. And they were like, wow, 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 do it again and again and again. And then finally, the high grade Masons at the time wanted to come and sit in. And Martinez was like, you can't sit in on these rights. And they were like, who says I can? And he was like, I say you can't because you're not an Elucoan of this particular degree. And so it was causing a lot of issues. Because, at their degree in this particular Grand Lodge of France, they had the right to go in and see anything they wanted. But Martinez was like, no, you don't. Only those who are row can go in and see this, on and on and on. So it created quite a stir, and this was something that they did not like. So what Michel Nahon says is that Martinez then went through the work of making pretty much another Grand Lodge, and you can read her book in French if you'd like. And it's pretty profound stuff. But the point is that Martinez never intended this to be regular masonry at all. He intended his rites of the Elucoan to be a kind of ordination or a really high theurgical priesthood. Now, what kind of priesthood it was and what kind of theurgy it is, that remains to be known only to those who have taken the oaths and have learned more. But what is for certain is that Martinez was not practicing regular masonry. It was, as he called, it was not apocryphal masonry. So that's one of the first points I wanted to make. The other one is that, like I was mentioning before, Martinez had a very Jacob Boehme kind of attitude to the Elucoan. He wanted, I believe, and I don't have any proof for this except for the fact that most Martinists revere Jacob Boehme, Saint Martin, Louis Claude de Saint Martin. He was very much enamored with Jacob Boehme so much that he translated and learned German to put all of his primary works into French. He says that one of the best quotes that I've ever seen is that Martinez contained the high keys of Jacob Boehme, but he did not trust the Elucoan with those keys. So, I mean, with that level of view from Saint Martin, I'm pretty safe in saying that Martinez was at least familiar with Jacob Boehme, if not translating his work through ritual form. So what happens is in the Treatise of Reintegration of Being, you have a lot of Jacob Boehme right there from the Mysterium Magnum. If you read it, you'll see that at first there's this divine power, and it has not power in the sense of the hermetic power as in emanative forces that come from an all-pervading source, but power as far as like a divine source. The divine source emanated from itself a will. And this will has a way of having its own emanation. The will in Jakob Böhme has what's called the Lubet, Lubet. And this is like a spiritual form that comes from the will of the divine. So you have the divine, and then you have the will, and then you have the Lubet. So this is very interesting that Martinez, in his book, talks about that there was a God the Son, God the Father, and God the Holy Spirit, of course. And this is something that's often spoken about, the dissection of the three persons in one entity. So I'm not going to go into that, but what he says is that there was, in all of these foundational ways, that there was God the Son, God the Father, and God the Spirit. And he goes through about 30 or 40 type pages, so they must have been handwritten. And also, this book did not come from Martinez. Martinez dictated this to Saint Martin, and among others, Saint Martin and some other people wrote it down. Which I was just talking with a friend about. It would be awesome to see somebody do a critical edition of the Treatise of Reintegration of Beings, because we do have many versions. We have Saint Martin's, we have the popularized version that came from translators, on and on and on. There's about 6 translations. We have Robert Amadou's critical edition in French from Rosicrucian Diffusionis, I think it's called, which has footnotes, but they're in French. So for us English speakers, we don't have access to those resources. The Society of Martinez de Pasqually did do some reviews on the treatise, so you have those in some of the older bulletins. And also we have a version by Prunel de Lier at the Library of Lyon. So there's a lot out there that we have not discovered or really put our hands on. The point is that in each one of these versions, you have the scribe, just like in biblical times, omitting and adding certain pieces. So you can't use it as a critical text to say, only this particular word means something and all the other words don't, and build a presentation around that. You have to look at it as a whole, and as a whole meaning as a tradition that passed through multiple people, multiple masters, if you'd like to call them that, with all different agendas. So I find this book really, really heavily influenced by the tradition, and not so much a influencer of the tradition, which is important to know. And these talks are pretty much the same thing. They are influenced by my association with those who are interested in this kind of language and talking, and we're probably going to go through the same route. So take that with a grain of salt. I wanted to talk about the similarities of Jakob Böhme and Martinez, but you're going to have to read the treatise to really get a good feel for that. So try to think of Jakob Böhme's will, word, Lubet, and the divine all power. You can see those in the Freyer diagrams, which I'm going to start showing eventually, because I plan to make this not only an Elu Cohen research channel, but the research into what kind of stuff the Elu Cohen was doing. Along with, if you go to a really good academia.edu site, we have Paul Rana, who has freely given a lot of his translations to the public to review. So you can go there and download these manuscripts and read them, not only in their original facsimile, but their transliterated French, which, let me tell you, if you've ever read any of these manuscripts, the French is really hard to transliterate. And then, not only that, the French is translated to our English language so we can read them. Great works of love. You can buy them. I have posted a link tree, but it's super important to get all of these old Purnell de Lier books and look at them and read them, because it takes all these primary sources to put together what this elitist group actually did. And make no mistake about it, these were not some mystics who were running around navel gazing. They were highly educated, elitist Masons who decided that they wanted to be able to carry forward a kind of tradition that would encompass everything, not only theurgical but theosophically too. So there's a lot to cover. But yeah, that's kind of an introduction to the background of the Treatise of Reintegration, which I didn't do the first time. I just jumped right into the text. So a good 15-minute intro to the text itself.